This video is going to cover the practice problems from the quarter 2 final review. Let's go ahead and get started. Question number 1. Solve the following equation. Now, on your review and on your test, it's super important not to add any extra spaces to your answers, and you'll notice that is a common theme on each one of the problems. Instructions. So I'm going to ignore the instructions, but make sure not to include any spaces in your answer. All right, the first problem says x plus 5 equals 18. Remember, in order to solve an equation, you must get x by itself. So here's x. I'm going to divide my equation by where the equal sign is, and whatever is on the same side as x, I need to get rid of it, and I need to use the inverse operation. So because x is being added by 5, I'm going to do the opposite and subtract 5. And if I do it on one side, then I'm going to do it on the other. So on the left side, I am left with 5 minus 5 zeros out, and I'm left with x. I bring down my equal sign. 18 minus 5 is 13. So my final answer is x equals 13. Let's try number 2. Solve the equation. I have the equation negative 7x equals 35. Now remember that negative 7x is the same as negative 7 being multiplied by x. In order to solve, I'm going to do the opposite of multiplication, because that is how I undo an equation. And here I go. Divide by negative 7, divide by negative 7. That means x is equal to, if I divide a positive by a negative, I get a negative, and 35 divided by 7 is 5. So my answer is negative 5. All right, number 3. I draw my line where my equal sign goes, and I want to get rid of everything that is on the same side as x but x. Now notice this time I have 2 things to get rid of. I need to get rid of the 2, and I need to get rid of the minus 18. Now, which do I get rid of first? When you solve, you get rid of order of operations backward. We do order of operations backwards. So if these are my order of operations, I'm going to work on anything that's being added or subtracted first. The 2 is being multiplied, the 18 is being subtracted, so I'm going to get rid of the 18 first and the 2 second. How do I get rid of the 18? What's the inverse of subtraction? Addition. So plus 18. Let's write down what we have left over. 2x is still there. Negative 18 and 18 zero out. Bring down my equal sign. Negative 10 plus 18 is a grand total of 8. Okay, now that I'm down to this step, remember that 2 is still being multiplied to x. How do I undo and get rid of that 2? I'm going to divide. That means x is equal to 4. And there we are on number 4. Number 4 asks us to solve the equation and solve for x. Now remember, I do order of operations backwards to get rid of what I would like so I can isolate the x. Now remember that adding and subtracting comes first. However, when I have a big fraction bar like this, it is trapping the numerator in these imaginary parentheses because of the division symbol. Remember, parentheses was the first in order of operations, so it's last when I solve an equation. So I can't reach that plus 8 yet. I need to get rid of the fraction bar. Well, how do I get rid of that? Remember, fraction is the same as division. So the opposite of division is multiplication. So what am I dividing by? I'm dividing by 4. So I'm going to multiply by 4 on both sides of my equation. Remember that equal sign, I have to do it once on each side. So I multiply by 4, and that eliminates the 4. Because the 4 is gone, that eliminates my fraction bar. So x plus 8 is no longer in those imaginary parentheses, equals 7 times 4 is 28. Now, how do I get x by itself? Now that x is no longer being divided by the 4, I'm going to get rid of anything no more parentheses, and we'll go back to the bottom, adding, subtracting. So subtract 8, x is equal to 20. Number 5, solve the following equation. Now, when I have an equation that includes parentheses and more than one x on one side, I first need to simplify. Okay? I cannot isolate for x when there are 2 of them. I can only have 1. So let's go ahead and simplify. My first step is to distribute, because I can't combine anything inside parentheses with something outside. So I got to get rid of those parentheses. So distribute the 4. 4x minus 36 plus 2x is equal to negative 66. My next step, I still can only have one x. So because these are on the same side, 4x and 2x, I can combine them. 4 plus 2 is 6x. Minus 36, there's nothing to combine it with, so I bring it down, equals negative 66. Now that I have both sides simplified as much as I can, I'm going to isolate x, because now I only have one of them. So which do I get rid of first? Remember, my order of operations, I go backwards, so I do any of the adding or subtracting first. There's no parentheses or to trap my subtraction. So I'm going to do the opposite of subtracting, which is adding. So plus 36, add 36 to both sides. 6x is equal to negative 30. Now I need to get rid of the 6. Remember, it's not being added, it's being multiplied, so I'm going to divide. And that results in x is equal to negative 5. All right, next problem, number 6. Solve the following equation. So I'm going to draw a line down my equal sign. Now I have 2 x's in this problem. Remember, I cannot solve for x if there's more than 1. So I need to find a way to get there to be only 1. On the last problem, I was able to just combine them, but they were on the same side. This equal sign acts as a barrier, as a wall. And in order to move something across the wall, instead of just combining them, I have to get rid of it on one side and add it to the other. So when I have a variable on both sides, my first step is to decide one side is going to be the variable side and one side is going to be the number side. The way I decide which is which side has the bigger variable. So this has 5x and this has 3x. This is the bigger variable. So variable side, number side. Now you might say, I do it the other way and it works. And you're right, it works either way. I just find this way is gives me less negative numbers to deal with. So if the right side is my variable side and the left side is my number side, that means I only want things that are just numbers on the side. Now negative 12 is just a number, but 3x is not. So I need to get rid of 3x on the left. Since I'm adding 3x, I always do the inverse operation. I'm going to subtract 3x. I get rid of them together, so the 3 and the x. So I'm going to minus 3x from both sides. That results in negative 12. There's nothing left here, it zeroes out, equals 2x minus 10. Now remember, this is my number side, and it is just the way I want it, and this is my variable side, and it's almost the way I want it. I have my variable over here, but I also have plus 10. That does not, the minus 10, that does not have a variable with it. So I need to get rid of it. Because it's subtraction, I'm going to do the inverse and add to both sides of that equal sign. And I am left with negative 2 is equal to 2x. How do I get x by itself? I divide by 2. And my final answer is negative 1 equals x, or x equals negative 1. And I'm done. Okay, let's look at the second one. So this is number 7 on your review. And notice that there's x's on both sides. Now, I cannot get rid of this x. I can't move it until it's outside of the parentheses. Okay, remember, parentheses come last. So if I can get rid of them, I can deal with it. So 3 times x is 3x. 3 times 5 is 15. And I am going to get x I'm going to choose which side should be my variable side. 6x is larger, so I'm going to make this my variable side, and I'm going to make this my number side. Notice I didn't decide which side was which until I had simplified. Now if this is my number side, I don't want any variables, so I'm going to subtract 3x since I am adding it. That's gone. And I'm left with 15 is equal to 6x, sorry, 6 minus 3 is not 6. 6 minus 3 is 3x minus 12. To finish this up, I'm going to leave just variables over here, so I need to add 12 to both sides. 15 plus 12 is 27 equals 3x. Remember, this is multiplication, so to undo that, I divide. 27 divided by 3 is 9. So x is equal to 9. All right, number 8. For some reason, it cut off the instructions. I'm going to solve this equation, and I'm going to solve for y. Notice this equation has more than one variable. So if there is more than one variable, remember your answer is also going to have more than one variable. I want to solve for y. The first step is to identify what you want to solve for. I put a box around it so that it's clearly marked. I draw a line down my equal sign to see what it is that I need to get rid of. And on the left-hand side, I need to get rid of the 2, and I need to get rid of the 4x. This is just like solving any equation. I need to get rid of what is being added or subtracted before anything that is being multiplied or divided. So the 2 needs to be gotten rid of last, and I'm going to get rid of 4x first because it's being added. Now some people might say, but 4 is being multiplied by x. I'm going to get rid of it all at the same time, and since it's all being added, that's what I get rid of first. So I'm going to subtract 4x from both sides. Oops, sorry about that. I'm going to subtract 4x. That zeroes out. I'm left with 2y on the left. Now this part's super important. 6 does not have an x on it, and 4 does, so I cannot combine them. Instead of combining them to give me 2, I'm just going to leave them separate, and I'm write them side by side. And because 4x came second, I'm going to make sure 4x comes second when I write my side-to-side answer. Next step, I need to get y by itself. This is multiplication, so I'm going to divide. Now here's the second most important thing. Make sure you divide everything by 2. And y is equal to, I'm going to simplify if I can. Does 6 divided by 2? Yes, it does. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. Here's the last most important thing. Make sure you divide both of those numbers. So negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. Because it had an x on it, I'm going to bring it down. And this would be my final answer. Y is by itself. There's still an x in my answer, but that's okay. Y is by itself. All right, number 9. Finding slope between 2 points. When you're finding slope between 2 points, remember I'm looking to write a fraction. So how do I find that slope? Remember, slope is the directions from my first point to my second point. And remember, I read a graph left to right. So this is point 1 and this is point 2. So how do I get from point 1 to point 2? Well, I'm going to count up and over. Remember, slope is equal to the rise over the run. And I'm always going to find the rise first. Rise is always either up or down. If I move up, that's a positive change. If I move down, that's a negative change. My run is right or left. If I move right, it's a positive change. If I move left, it's a negative change. So here I go. To get to point 2, I need to move up. So I'm going to count spaces. We'll count 1, 2 spaces, 3 spaces. And I stop because I don't want to go any higher because point 2 is no higher. So that is I counted up, so positive change, and I counted 3 spaces, so positive 3. Then I'm going to find my run, so I need to move right in order to get to point 2. So counting space 1, again, space 2, 3, 4. And I move to the right, so that's a positive change, 4. So my slope is positive 3 over positive 4. Now make sure you always simplify. Don't leave those pluses in your answer. 3 over 4 would be my final answer. So let's try that again. Remember, I always move left to right. So this is point 1 and this is point 2. I always find on my fraction, I always find the rise and then the run. So rise means I need to move up or down. So to get from point 1 to point 2, I need to move down. And I'm going to count spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces to get me down to point 2. Now I moved down 5, so remember that's a negative change. To get to my point, I need to now move to the right. 1 space, 2 spaces, 3 spaces, 4 spaces, and I move to the right. So remember that is a positive change. I go to write my fraction. Remember, rise or up and down is on top. So -5 finds its way on the top and +4 finds its way on the bottom. And remember, don't write any pluses. We simplify our answer to -5/4. And that would be my answer. All right, question number 11. Number 11. Find the slope from the following points. Remember, if I'm finding slope from points, I'm going to use a slope formula, and this is definitely something you want written down for your test. y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. And this formula helps me figure out what my slope is. So the very first step is to identify what the y1 and y2, what numbers they are. So if I go up to my ordered pairs up top, and I'm going to change my color, make it a little thicker. Hey, remember all points are x and then y. And because this is my first point, I label them with little ones. That means 4 is an x, 15 is a y, and because this is my second point, they are x2 and y2. Now that I have them labeled, I'm just going to replace those in my formula. So what is y2? y2 corresponds to the number 15. So in this formula, and I'm going to make my fraction bar to replicate this formula, I'm going to take out y2 and I'm going to replace it. And I'm going to replace it with 15. Then I have a minus sign, so I'm going to write a minus sign. Now I want to subtract y1. So I come up here. y1 is associated with 4, so I put 4 in its place. Now I go to the bottom of my fraction. x2 is associated with also the number 4 from the second point. And then I put a minus sign because this includes a minus sign. x1, so minus 10. And I simplify. 15 minus 4 is 11. 4 minus 10 is -6. And I asked myself, can I simplify this at all? Well, 11 and 6 have no common factors. So I'm going to leave this as my final answer. So let's try that again. All right, let's work on number 12. And I actually changed this to a -1 on your review. So let's fill out our formula. y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. I label my points first. So this is x, this is y, and I put a 1 because it's my first point. This is x, this is y, and I put a 2 because it's my second point. Now I'm going to create my slope. Make sure I have a fraction bar. So I'm going to take y2, I'm going to match it to the number, which is an 8. I'm going to write down a minus sign. Now I'm minusing -1. So I'm going to write minus -1. Now I go to the bottom part of my fraction. x2 matches to 6. x1 matches to 5. And remember, I'm subtracting them. Now you might have not included the negative because there's already minus sign there. Make sure you have both of them because I need to add them. 8 plus 1 is 9. 6 minus 5 is 1. And remember to simplify your slope. There's no common factors, so 9/1 is simplified, but I can change it to 9. All right, number 13. How do I find slope from a table? Well, the same way as I found slope from a point. Remember, this is a point and this is a point. Okay, these are both x's, so here's my points, -3, 0, and my second point is 2, 2. So this was my first point, x1, y1, and this is my second point, x2, y2. My formula, okay, so what is y2? 2 minus y1 is 0 divided by 2 minus x1 is -3 yes, include the negative and the minus sign, and simplify. 2 minus 0 is 2. Subtracting negative is like adding, so my slope is 2 over 5, and that is my simplified slope. All right. The next part asks me to graph, and on your review, it's going to have you match to the correct graph. So here we go. In order to graph something, remember I start with, and here's how I would show my work. I start with a graph, and I'm gonna kind of make it go 5 in each direction really quick. My very first step is to find a starting point. Remember, if there is no y-intercept, okay, and remember, when I talk about y-intercept, I'm talking about this format, y equals mx plus b. We have this part of our equation, but we're missing this plus b. If it's missing, that means it's 0. Otherwise, why would it be gone? So plus 0. That stands for my y-intercept. So I'm going to start at 0, 0. I'm going to put my starting point, my very first point at 0, 0. My slope, which is the 2, because I can find it always next to x. It is my slope. It's my directions to my next point. Remember, all of our slopes were written as fractions. So 2 over 1 would be my slope. Remember, the top number tells me to rise. It either tells me to go up or down, and because it's positive, it's telling me to go up. And the 1 is telling me to go right because it's positive. So I'm going to move up and to the right. I'm going to move up 2 spaces from my starting point, and here's my starting point at the center. So I'm going to count up 2 spaces, and to the right 1 space, and I'm going to make a point. And I'm going to connect my dots, and that is my line. So let's try that again with 5x minus 3. I'm going to start my graph, go 5 in each direction, so I have room to graph it. I'm going to look for my starting point first. Your y-intercept is your starting point, and it's the one that's all by itself. So my starting point is at negative 3. Make sure you bring that minus sign with it. It's attached. So if my starting point is negative 3, and it's a y-intercept, so I'm going to start on the y-axis, negative 3. So on my y-axis, negative 3 is down 3. So I'm going to put my starting point down 3. Remember to convert your slope to a fraction so I know what both directions are. The 5 is positive, so I'm going to move up 5 spaces, and the 1 is positive, so I'm going to move 1 space to the right. So this is the most important part. Go back to your starting point before you follow those directions. And I'm going to move up 5 spaces, so up 1 space, 2 space, 3 space, 4 space, 5 spaces. And I'm going to move to the right 1 space. And I'm going to plot my point, and I'm going to connect my dots, and there is my line. All right. Next example. So on my next example, we're going to make our graph again, 5 in each direction. 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I am going to start at my y-intercept, which is the number that's all by itself. So I'm going to start at 4. It's my y-intercept, so I need to start on the y-axis. I'm going to change colors so I can see my graph better. So I'm going to start on the 4 on my y-axis. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and plot my point. My instructions to get to my next point are these, and they're already written as a fraction, but I'm going to write them down here so I can write down what the instructions mean. Now, when the negative is out front, it always goes with the top. So here I go. So it goes with the top. Now, since the top is negative, that is telling me to go down 1 space, and the 2 is still positive, so it's telling me to go right 2 spaces. So going back to my starting point before I follow those directions, I'm going to go down 1 space and to the right 2 spaces and plot a point. Now that I have 2 points, I can make my line. All right. Now, when my equation looks like this and y is not by itself, my very first thing and this should be a 6x, apologies. The very first thing that I need to do is get y by itself so that I can use those y-intercept and slope to graph. I'm going to rewrite my formula because I did change it. Okay, so I need to get y by itself. I'm going to draw my equal sign down. What do I need to get rid of? I need to get rid of the 2 and the 6x. 6x is being added. I'm going to get rid of it first. So I'm going to minus 6x. And if this was a negative 6x, I would add 6x. So I'm going to minus 6x from both sides. What does that leave me with? Well, that leaves me with 2y on the left. And because negative 10 does not have an x, I'm going to write them separately. So I'm going to divide by 2 to get y by itself. Y is equal to, now notice I have negative 5 and divide both of them. Negative 6 divided by negative 2 is negative 3x. All right, let's find our graph. If I go 5 in each direction, I'm going to change color again so you can see my graph. My starting point, now it looks in a funky order, so let's rewrite it so it's in slope-intercept form. Negative 3x and minus 5. Notice the 5 is still negative and the negative 3 is still negative. So negative 5 is my y-intercept because it's all by itself. So I'm going to move down 5 spaces and it's my y-intercept, so I'm going to move 5 to the negative 5 on my y-axis. So there's my starting point. My slope is negative 3. I'm going to convert it to a fraction, negative 3 over 1. Now the 3 means I'm going to move down 3 spaces, and the 1 means I'm going to move right 1 space. Now if I notice, I can't actually move down if I'm at the bottom of my graph. But I'm going to pretend like I am going to. I'm going to visualize where it's going to go. I'm going to move down 3 spaces and to the right 1. Now here would be my line. It would be going slanted downwards because my slope is negative. Well, how do I know where the point actually appears on my graph? I'm going to repeat this pattern, but in the opposite direction. I want my line to go like this. So instead of going down 3, I'm going to go up 3, 1, 2, 3, and to the right and to the left 1. So the exact opposite, and that makes my line straight. And that's going to be your matching graph. All right, last one on graphing. So y equals negative 3. How do I graph that? Remember Hoy and Vux. So I am going to remember that whenever I see a y, I'm going to remember Hoy. Remember, Hoy means horizontal. So I'm going to find on my y-axis negative 3, and I'm going to find on my y-axis, because it's y equals negative 3. That's down 3. I'm going to plot a point. And if I remember Hoy, that means I'm going to draw, and I'm going to make it a different color so I can see it, and make a horizontal line. And I'm done. Now, this isn't on your review, but I think it's worth mentioning. If you had x equals 4, how would I graph that? Okay, go to the x-axis to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And remember, x is Vux, so vertical through that line, through that point. All right, next section. There are 3 airplanes traveling at constant speeds. For each, the traveled distance traveled depends on time, as it is shown below. So how fast is each airplane moving? So airplane A, okay, at 0 seconds, he's 0 miles. And at 1 second, he's 600 miles. So how fast is he traveling? Well, he traveled 600 meters, in 1 second. So airplane A speed is 600 over 1, or just 600 meters per second. Airplane 2, how do I find his rate? Remember that any rate in an equation can be found next to my variable. So 580 is airplane B's rate, meters per second. And airplane C, okay, well, at 0 seconds, he traveled 0. And at 1 second, he's at 610. So he traveled 610 meters in 1 second. What is that simplified? 610 meters per second. So that's all of their speeds. And the next question is going to ask which airplane travels the fastest. Well, which of these is the biggest number? 610 That means airplane C travels the fastest. Use the graph below to write an equation in slope-intercept form. So in order to write an equation in slope-intercept form of my graph, I need two things. So remember, y equals mx plus b. M is my slope, and b is my y-intercept. So let's identify both of those things in our graph. In my graph, I can see my y-intercept as it crosses right here at 1. And my slope is to get from 1 to get to my y-intercept to my next point. So the directions that I would want to state to get from one point to the next is I would say I would want to move up 1 space and to the right 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. So what does that look like as my equation? In front of x go my directions to my next point. So rise goes on top. So I would say to rise 1 or go up 1 and run 4. So my fraction is 1 over 4, and my y-intercept is a positive 1. So I'm going to write plus 1. And that is my simplified answer. Let's try that again. I'm going to write my slope and I'm going to make sure I write my slope in simplified form. So I'm going to fill out the form y equals mx plus b. I need two things. I need my y-intercept and I need my slope. So here's my y-intercept, and my slope is to get from one point to the next. Now, this time, this is 0.1 because it comes, if I'm going left to right, this is 0.1 and this is 0.2. So how do I find the slope? Yeah, to get from 0.1 to 0.2, I'm going to rise first. Now it seems backwards that I have to go down, but I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces. And since it's down, I'm going to use negative. And I'm going to run 1, 2 spaces. So what does that give me as my slope? Remember, the directions go as a fraction, how much I rise on top, how much I run on bottom. My x goes right after, plus my y-intercept. Where is my y-intercept at on my y-axis? It's at -1. So I'm going to simplify my answer. -5 over 2x plus negative can be simplified to -1. And that is my final answer. Write an equation in slope-intercept form that passes through these points. All right, so this time I still need to fill in the formula y equals mx plus b, but now I don't have these plots visually plotted, so I can't do my counting. So remember, I use my slope formula, which is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And that's also I can find m, or my slope. So here I go. I'm going to start by labeling them. This is x, and this is y, and this is my first point. This is x, this is y, and this is my second point. So I'm going to start by finding m. Remember, in formula, y equals something x plus something. I'm going to fill in these blank spots. So here we go. If I follow my formula, y2, I'm going to make my fraction bar. y2 is a 5, matches to a 5, minus y1, matches to a 2, divided by x2, which is 6, minus 0. So let's simplify. 5 minus 2 is 3. We're going to write it down here. And 6 minus 0 is 6. Does that slope simplify? Yes, it does. They top and bottom can both be divided by 3. And simplifies to 1/2. Make sure you write your slope in simplified form. So y equals 1/2 x plus, now I need to fill in this last spot. I need to find my y-intercept. So I go to my points. Do either of them have a 0 in the x slot? Yes, this one does. So this is my y-intercept. My y value is 2. And that is as simplified as I can make it, and that is my final answer. Let's try that again. So y equals mx plus b. I'm going to start with my m, which is the formula y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. So here we go. Label your points. X, y, those are 1s. X, y, those are 2s. Here's my slope. y2 corresponds to -5. y1 corresponds to 1. So -5 minus 1, And on the bottom, x2, 2, x1 minus 0. So here we go. Negative 5 minus 1. Give me, I'm going to make my fraction down here. Negative 6 over 2. Now does this simplify? Yes, they can both be divided by 3. So negative 3 over 1, or it just simplifies to negative 3. So I go up to my equation. I'm going to replace m. Well, y equals negative 3x plus, what is my y-intercept? Okay, go back to my points. Do either of them have a 0 in the x spot? This first one does. So this is my y-intercept, and my y-intercept is 1. And that is my simplified answer. All right, last problem. I'm going to write the equation that passes through the points in the following table. So remember, these are just points. This is x and this is y, and they're my first points. So x and y1. And this is my second point, and they're in the second row. So this is x2 and y2. I'm going to use my slope formula. Again, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Because remember, I'm trying to fill out slope-intercept form. Y equals mx plus b. So I want to replace m with my slope. Remember, this is my m. And I'm going to find my y-intercept as well. But let's focus on our slope first. So y2, I'm going to bring it over here. Y2 is 0 minus y1. So minus a negative 6 divided by x2 is 7 and x1 is 0. So let's simplify that. 0 minus negative 6, that's like adding. So 6. 7 minus 0 is 7. So my slope, so let's convert what we know already. 6 over 7x, and that's simplified. Plus, what is my y-intercept? Remember, we're looking for a point in the table where the x value is 0. So here's my x column, x value is 0 right here. So what is my corresponding y-intercept? Negative 6. And you can always simplify plus a negative to minus. So y equals 6 over 7x minus 6. And that is it. If you have any questions, please reach out.